Okay, great. Hello, everyone, and good evening. I'm Supriya Bhualka, and the founder of Coding and More. We are a personalized edtech that teaches AI to children in the K-12 grade band. Besides teaching children AI in the classroom, we like to expose them to the applications of AI in the real world. And every month, we invite an expert and have them talk about the application of AI in their field so that, when you grow up, you would also know how AI is actually being used in various industries. So today's our theme this month is AI in social media, and we have with us Dr. Hastagiri Vanchinathan. I'm sorry if I have pronounced your name incorrectly. He is ex-Facebook, now Senior AI Director at ShareChat and Moj. He is very, very well educated. He had his master's in computer science in the Indian Institute of Science. He's got his doctorate in philosophy, machine learning, computer science, data mining from the Institute of Zurich. The name was in French or German, so I couldn't get it down right. So I'm sorry about that.
ETH Zurich, the place where Einstein had his PhD from.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's cool. So over to you, Dr. Vanchinathan. I'd like you to also set the ground because people talk about social media without even understanding what social media actually entails, encompasses, which platforms. So if you could tell us a little bit about social media, about your work, and then we can get into it further.
Yep, thank you. Thank you, Sophia, for the introduction. So yeah, I've been working mostly on ranking, personalization of content that people see on different forms, like including search, advertising, but also your news feed on social media, be it Facebook, Instagram, these kind of problems for a very long time now. And my PhD was also in this area. So in general, when people talk about social media, right? So it's, for me, the way I think about social media is an extension of the real world. It enables us to do things that we would have done in the real world if we had access to a larger network that we have in our personal lives, right? So a famous Milgram experiment that was done, decades ago before the social media advent, where people were asked to send a letter to a random address, and they did not know the address. They just know that they had to reach a person in some city, and they had to take a best guess of how can they forward this letter to that person. So they'll have to send it to someone that they know, and then that person will say, okay, maybe this person is a better chance of finding out who that is, and then sending it across, and so on. And people figured out that there's 6 degrees of connection, where you could potentially like reach anybody on earth in 6 hops by sending this postcard, right? Now, since the advent of social media, this has shrunk to 4, maybe even 3.5 at this point in time on average, that you could reach anybody in the world in 3 hops, 4 hops, right? So this is something that I would say social media has brought in, that it's made us all connected. Some of these things, like there are the ways ideas spread throughout history. If you see, right, there'll be one strong proponent and a few backers of this idea, and how quickly they can take this word and go around and convince people. The strength of the idea and the power of like how quickly it spreads, that's what makes something long lasting and successful. You could do that for religions, you could do that for an ideology, you could do that for a movement, and so on. And we see more and more in the recent years that the time to spread an idea from a remote corner from somewhere has to everywhere in the world has shortened significantly. And I would say that this is social media basically, where it allows us, gives everybody a platform to reach a much wider audience. So that in my idea head is social media.
Since you spoke about reach, I want to first start, because social media gets a lot of flack, with the negative implications, right? Especially about the whole fake news. I like to end on a positive note. So we'll first just get into this, that, how is AI being used, in social media? And I also know that AI is now being used to prevent the spread of fake news, right? So could you elaborate a little bit about that?
In the end, social media is a connection medium, right? So essentially, if you say that people call up someone and say that pass on the fake news over telephone, then you don't say that telephone as an invention is bad, because somebody is still spreading fake news by making that call, right? So similarly with social media, in general, the media itself, so you have to separate out the implementation of social media by certain companies from the concept of the social media itself, right? So here AI played a huge role initially in making these filter bubbles and fake news and so on much worse than what it should be, right? Essentially, it's like it was in general, like people are going after very short-term metrics in terms of like increasing time spent on the platform, increasing engagement, wanting to beat out competition, and it was a race to the bottom. If you didn't do it, your competition would do this to get better metrics, and people are caught in this frenzy. But now, since and AI played a huge part, I would say like a big mistake there in where some of the AI scientists spent their times on like increasing these short-term metrics was also like not the right approach. But there was no, it was almost an economic decision, not a ethical decision at that point. But going on from there, combating these now is also, you cannot do this with social moderation. If you are listening into 2 billion people, you cannot have a few thousand people policing or censoring what is being said and what is being shared and so on. So you need, by definition, a machine to look through all of this, and a machine with the power of almost a human level sensor board for social media, right? So that also AI is one that is stepping in and playing a part there. So we have played a part, the AI scientists, we have played a part in the bad parts initially as well. But now in the combat against this too, like we are playing a part, a very important part there.
So that is now up to each social media company to sort of put in the algorithm to prevent the fake news, etc. Right? I mean, there's no incentive for them to do that. This comes down to the ethics of the company or the philosophy of a company.
Correct. So here too, regulatory bodies will have to play an important role. There's a very strong school of thought that you cannot let a profit-making body make the right decisions for society at large. You cannot expect that. It might happen, people might do it, but you cannot expect that. We need centralized regulations on some of these, what are policies essentially. If someone is, let's say a small company starts out with saying that we want to be perfectly fair and we want to be like weed out filter bubbles and so on, the competition would eat them. They would not improve on metrics compared to their competition, and then the company would be a failure from the economic terms, and they would never be able to take that idea further. So we need to make sure that there's fair competition, and the regulatory bodies should get involved in this. So it's a combination, it's sort of a private public partnership that would work here.
Yeah. Can I also ask you to, explain the filter bubbles for the general person child, because they may not know what a filter bubble is, and unknowingly they're creating it around themselves, right?
Yeah. So filter bubble is when you believe in something and or you like something and you get drawn to this news or this post which is around this topic because you like it. And since you have done one more positive interaction on this topic, you've read this piece, then again, like, you're given more of this. Let's say that, like, for instance, if you are only taught the subjects where you score, some X plus marks, like, only if you cross 70, you're only taught that subject again and again. Now, this would create a filter bubble where you would never work on a subject where you got less than 70, because by definition, you've weeded that out. The school is teaching you more and more of the same subjects where you're good at. So this is an example of a filter bubble, let's say, where you just get better and better or more and more information about things that you like or you believe in, and you don't get any exposure to the subjects that you're not good at currently, right? So similarly, if you take that for filter bubble, right? If you're given a choice between, like, do you want, like, for instance, if you go to a restaurant and you don't buy the salad there, right? So it's like, there's a salad and there's an unhealthy option that is there. Then you pick the unhealthy option. So the restaurant would learn that the salad is not selling. So they'll take this off the menu. So the choice is gone. So now you have very small decisions, micro decisions that add up finally to making sure that you don't get access to the other part at all.
That's great. Also, Dr. Vanchinathan, you had mentioned in our last call that the filter bubble that existed 10 years ago versus today, it has been refined. And it's almost like a company has to make a choice between the economic welfare versus, getting the customer right on the first go. So how do you sort of balance that?
Yeah, so there is I mean, more than economy here, it's also like I would say the long-term value of a user, right? So if you, what people have realized over time is that while there are short-term benefits to feeding into this filter bubble, right? Making sure that people only see what they like and what they believe in. Like for instance, COVID vaccines, right? Like that is one great example where some folks believe that the vaccine causes harmful side effects, right? And it's not worth taking the vaccine. Now, if you believe that, you're going to look for all the news, like, if you search for vaccine side effects, of course, you're going to get all the side effects of the vaccine if you're specifically searching for that, right? So you'll start clicking on that. And hence now when Google personalizes your search results, you'll start seeing more and more results which are closer to this kind of articles. So you're moving away from the truth. You're moving towards what you were anyway searching for. So you find what you're looking for, right? So that's what will happen. But then what these companies have realized, and also research has shown, is that these are maybe short-term beneficial, like people search more, people click more, people spend more time, but then in the long term this affects the mental well-being, and these users are no longer, like when they realize that they're no longer on the platform, they consciously avoid the platform. So what has happened is that there's an explore exploit trade-off. Like, you want to exploit what information you know about the user, but you also want to explore other topics for the user, move them away, give them a different point of view, show them that where you are having the conversation is not the actual conversation point, the actual conversation point at a different spot, and move them there.
You had a question, Rushan? Go ahead.
I wanted to ask
Can't hear.
And
now can you?
yes.
Okay, so I wanted to ask what could be the reason behind like there are no profanity checks on the comments. Like trolls are very famous these days and we cannot put a check on them. So what could be the main reason behind it?
Right. So uh, there's also like a philosophical reason where free speech, right? Many of these companies that are really successful in this space, like be it a Google, be it a Facebook, or Twitter, they believe in free speech. There should be no censoring of free speech as long as it doesn't hurt another person. Now, the level of hurt, like for instance, if you're walking on a street and somebody were to, shout profanities, right? Now, who's policing that? Who's stopping that? It's the same here. The platform is there for people to come in. That was the thought process. I'm not saying it's the right one, by the way. That was the thought process, that we will censor only that which is immediately harmful to our users. Now, over time, we have figured out that some of these accumulated microaggressions actually translate to real world harm to the end user, and hence people are taking a stronger stance now. But at that point in time when it came out, it wasn't clear that there was an immediate threat there. And should we act as the gatekeepers of decency? Should we act as the gate, like, it's much more dangerous to think that a company like a Facebook or a company like a Google or whoever, right, like all very good companies, should act as the gatekeepers of decency and propriety on the internet, right? So that's, I would say, that is a much worse scenario than having, let's say, harmless profanities on the platform. Now, when this profanity turns out to be harmful, then definitely the companies have a responsibility to stop this and make sure that users have a choice of, what level of censorship is needed on their content. I think we have lost Supriya. Yeah, sorry. Hey, Darshi, you had a question?
Because I was just thinking there was a game. It's a very it's not so famous app. The app called Poco. It has the profanity check. We are not allowed to type some words. I was impressed with that app and I was just wondering why can't like Instagram and these social media and other chat things like WhatsApp have them?
Absolutely, absolutely true. But like I said, right, so here, Pogo is it? They've made a choice. Sorry?
Poco it is.
Poco. Okay. So they've made a choice that, like, with given our target audience and given, like, whom we are reaching out to, where our major user base is coming from. This is completely fine. Like it's like having the age labels on the movies, right? So you say some is like parental guidance, some is 12 plus, some is 18 plus, and so on. They have decided that for our target audience, we are okay not to just have a warning, but to actually take out these words straight away, right? So it's like it's taking this. But if you look at an Instagram or a Facebook, maybe they have decided that we want to give this control to the user, that a user can say this is the level of content that I want to have, and then it will get filtered out for you, but they would still allow this on the platform. So I think these are very different decisions that company take depending on their total user base and where they want to reach. uh, yeah, so that's.
Uh, so taking this forward, can companies allow certain, like, can users themselves filter certain words that I don't want to see a comment which has profanities in it? Because yeah, I mean, simple, like I in the comment section of, for can the companies allow that I don't want certain words to be showed up on my feed at all? Like, I think Twitter has it to some extent, where you don't get to see, you can mute certain words or block certain words.
Right.
So can it become like a regulatory thing for all companies to give the control again back to the user, that I don't want to see such comments?
Absolutely right. So the problem with some of these user level controls is that people don't use it. It's like 1 or 2% of the population who uses it. The others are either not aware or don't take the effort to do this. For instance, today you can block a lot of the websites from showing you personalized ads, from sharing your data with all the advertisers, right? But we have known that only 3 or 4% of the users actually go into these controls on their browser or on a website specific request to change these controls. Otherwise, so if we do this, right, what would end up happening is that the companies would say that I would say it's an easy decision. Like, it's a lazy decision, because now 2% of the people would set up everything well for themselves. I don't want to see these users, I don't want to see these words, and I want to have this level of filtering. The remaining 98% would be getting all of this and be exposed to all the garbage that is there. And uh, the companies would say we have anyways given the control, so it's their responsibility, right? So now how do you educate the 98% of the users? So it's a lazy decision to do this. It's a right one on top of other measures. So this doesn't preclude, or this doesn't stop the other measures from happening.
Okay, thank you.
Anjali, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm Anjali's mom. I'm Gomati. Taking the lead on the previous one, like most of the time when I see these ads, repeatedly, which are like, say for example, Baiju's ad bombarding, Byte Hat Junior bombarding, the mere fact that there are options to say that, it asks you, right, reporting. If I say report the ad, it will say why. Four, 5 choices are given. I randomly click something, but I feel that data itself is being used to collate and market. I find it, the mere fact that I click some of the options and avoid an ad itself is feeding into the database of whether I like something or not. So what is happening? I mean, would there be a point where like I started from Orkut, then went to Facebook, now Instagram, Snapchat? Would there be a point where I completely shut off? I get fatigued by all of this and not look at it anymore. Where do you see companies like yourself in this kind of a fatigue scenario? Or do you think the next generation will catch up on the viewership or eyeballs? How do you see this?
Absolutely. So we have already seen two things happening, since only 20 years of online advertising and about 10 years of 12 years of social media. We have seen two things happening. One is that users are voting with their feet right now. If this is going to happen on a regular basis, people just leave networks en masse and go to like other places where they can find and that is causing these companies to take stock of what is happening and improve the situation. The other thing that is happening is that the younger folks are learning much faster to tune out advertisements. So the effect of like advertisements is causing less and less, both in terms of like final end effect to the user, but also an irritation, the irritation factor. It's much lower for younger folk because they learn to tune it out completely. It's like random noise now. So now it becomes like a chicken and egg game, where now the companies are going after how best do we make sure that users notice our ads. So the answer is less ads, more relevant ads, things that you would really be find useful and find it like relevant. So that's what companies are moving towards. So in many of these companies, the spend on ranking the advertisements and targeting them is much more on the AI systems than on even like newsfeed ranking, because they have figured out like random ads and bombarding with ads does not work.
I'm sorry, I got logged out because of an internet issue. I'm back. I actually wanted to ask you, so when you talk about the ranking and what ads are shown, how much of it is human intervention? How much of it is AI? Um, I also read that also where the ad is placed, even on the browser, has an effect. We also, read about Netflix, how they have different sort of um, photographs for each cover for each show. I mean, how much of that is AI, how much of that is human intervention?
And pretty much all of it is AI. So the human intervention starts only at the point where an advertiser comes and says, I want my ad to look like this. Like I will talk about ads, we'll go into other aspects as well. I want my ad to talk about this. This is the message I want to send, right? And here are elements of the ad, like the border, the picture that you can be used. So it's very templatized in the sense that you could pick and choose different components and form an ad, right? Now each of those components could have like 50,000 variants, different color schemes, different pictures, different font sizes, even, and so on. And now the machine would start picking this up, slowly experimenting with different of these and see what is working for what user. And then you will get a personalized ad copy finally, and also where it's placed, at what point in your newsfeed is it placed, uh, right? So all of this is completely algorithmic decision making.
Oh, okay. So I have a question that what else is, I mean, how else we're using AI in social media other than recommendation systems?
Almost everywhere you can think of in social media, right? So from fairness, from accountability, from trust, from privacy preservation, to like the whole recommender systems, understanding what a post is about, trust and safety issues, copyright violations, detecting copyright violations on the platform, uh, removing like content that violates the policy and so on. In all of these places, it's extremely AI driven, right? So let's take Instagram for an example, right? So a creator comes on board, right? So which creator should we target to bring onto the platform? Or if you take Moj, where we are currently working, right? We are onboarding, we are making livelihoods for creators, like where India, we know, like people like to get entertainment content, so they want to say, I have half an hour, give me like short videos that I can laugh at, like can learn from, and so on. Now there are creators who are earning a livelihood by creating content here. Now, which creators should we bring on the platform, and how much should we actually monetize them for? Like, what is the target audience they'll go to? This is determined by an AI algorithm. Once the creator starts creating content and they start putting up their videos there, though there's a screening there for the videos to make sure that it complies with the policy of the company. Then once that new post is there, we don't know who will be interested in this new post, right? It might be of a new topic that we don't know about. Now, how do you expose it to a limited set of users to know more about what topic this post might be? That is decided by the AI algorithm. Then the whole recommendation, once you know something about this post, how do you go through the journey of showing it to different users and on their newsfeed? That is an AI algorithm. Similarly, like if you look at, there are certain concepts of fairness. You want to make sure that only a few creators don't get all the benefit. You want to spread around the benefit of followership and influencer marketing and so on. So now, how do you make sure that at a platform level, you're giving an equal chance for everyone? You're not discriminating against certain types of creators or certain type of content. So that again is an AI algorithm which is working to make sure that this doesn't happen. So it's AI is involved in multiple of these steps. And mostly because the need is driven by the fact that the volume is so much that you cannot do what could be done by humans before. like, a newspaper editor who's sitting there and like saying this story goes into my newspaper, this doesn't. Now an algorithm has to do, just because of the volume of content.
I think Vedika had a question. Vedika,
Hi. Yeah, I did. So I read this article somewhere that so on Facebook, to filter content that comes to us, Facebook's hired these people who physically go through different content, and it's not just any content. It's like dark matter. So things like crimes and murders and sorts
Mhm.
things of that nature. And the thing is that this kind of activity really takes a toll on these people, right? Because they're going through multiple videos day in and day out.
Right.
So my question would be like, would there be any way AI could play a role in actually taking over from these people, or intervene? Or is there something like this already happening with AI? I mean,
Yes.
yeah.
So if you look at Facebook, right? I don't know the public numbers right now, but I can tell you what was announced like a few months ago, right? 97% of the content that is removed as being objectionable is removed by AI. So there's only 3% of the content which AI is not sure of, or it lets it through on the platform and somebody reports. That goes to these content moderators. And now there too, like, there's many more things to be done here, where basically we could make sure that, beyond a certain level of exposure, a user is given, like a content moderator is given a break, or used in some other role for some time because their exposure has increased certain parts. Those things can and will be done over time, but for now, this is only 2-3% of the content that gets on the platform that they are being exposed to. And even there, you're absolutely right that this is causing a lot of mental anguish and people needing a lot of consulting, like sort of healthcare professionals be getting involved, mental health professionals, because of the way they're exposed to this content. It's a very sad state, but it's almost necessary for, like, some of these people to have to do this job for the good of everybody else.
Right. Sorry, just lead on. But like with Facebook, with companies so big, the huge companies, right? Wouldn't there be a certain kind of responsibility? I mean, yes, you do have to look at the content given to your audience and everything, but also the people working for you. At the end of the day, I feel mental health shouldn't be a compromise in any situation. Um,
I
and
I
yeah,
completely agree. So the minimization of this impact of these jobs, right? Like, people are the way the content moderators are, their sort of work setup is very, very different to like a software engineer or a data scientist or an AI engineer, right? So they have access to healthcare, like, mental healthcare professionals on an everyday basis. They can report things like, I'm getting fatigued of this, like, it's affecting me, so I need to take a break. They have like much more flexible policies there. But beyond that, you are AI is a data driven discipline, right? So there will be mistakes that AI makes. Now, who should face the brunt of it, right? And I don't want to do false equivalences here, but think of the garbage collectors in our cities, right now, if you think of a job that absolutely has to be done today, now one could argue that they are going through a similar kind of exposure to things, like, in terms of like how they have to work and their working conditions. But it's a job that needs to be done. It's our job as a society to make sure that, they're getting paid very well and they can sort of compensate for it in one way or the other. But it's the same problem. Like, it's at a city level you have these, and at a company level you have these content moderators. It's a very, very open question on how to solve this.
okay, thank you.
that's a very interesting analogy that you said over there. Coming back to the mental health issues, one of the positive impacts of AI and the fact that, we all talk about data privacy, right? That with, being on a connected device, you're giving away all of your private data. But at the same time, to put a positive spin to it, do you see the trend where companies again are, without government incentives, are looking at preventing, mental health issues, or, suicide, or, other things that might come up, in a person's social media presence?
Absolutely. I think this is something that the power to do this right now is not with governments. In many ways, like, these social media companies, based on your activity, know much more about you than your closest friends or your, the people that you spend most time with offline, because of them being able to notice all your activities there, right? So now it's a trade-off between, like, let's say, privacy versus value to the platform. How much of it do you want to use? For instance, if I believe that someone is about to commit a crime based on their online activity, now how much of it should I expose, right? And there are, like, it's never a black and white decision, it's a gray area. And there are certain kinds of crimes, hate crimes, and terrorist activities and so on, which these companies have tied up with governments around the world to say that as soon as we have any evidence of this, we will, at this level of confidence, we'll be able to share that information with you, right? So they have done this. In certain other cases, it's something that is violating the privacy of the individual to go and say that this person is planning to not pay for, I don't know, the bread that he buys tomorrow. Like, maybe he spoke about it somewhere, right? Like, now what do you do? Like, do you expose it is still a crime, but do you expose the individual violating the, so it's a gray area, and, like, people have drawn different lines, and it's a constant tension between the companies and the governments to push this line backwards or forwards in terms of how much data access they have. In terms of suicide prevention, there's quite a bit of work even within researchers who are working in ShareChat and Moj today, about, like, just looking at the posts and the online activity of individuals to identify who's at risk of depression, who's at the risk of, like, a potential suicide, and directing them to mental health professionals, but giving the nudge to the user rather than externally to ask someone to intervene. This work has been, like, in the last 4 or 5 years, this has got up quite a bit.
So what motivates companies to do this? I mean, when a company decides that they do want to help the consumer, they're not getting anything out of it, right? And any anti-suicide, they're all social impact. So I mean, are companies actually doing this? And
Absolutely, absolutely, right. So this is the same as asking why oil companies are becoming cleaner, using cleaner energy. There's no need for them to do this. Uh, it's multiple things. One, they want to create a healthy environment for users to live in, right? Online for them. So that is something that is a intrinsic motivation, that our platform should be safe. Our platforms should not drive people to things that they wouldn't have, like, otherwise had done to them. Or if there's a way to do this, like, I think there's a very strong incentive to do this anyway, like, there's an intrinsic motivation. Apart from that, there's a PR angle to it. Like, apart from all the bad press that these companies receive, they also would be very interested in making sure that they would get these positive bits as well, if they can help out with, right? So I think it's both. Most of it is intrinsic motivation, but there is some selfish aspect to it as well, to say that let's balance out the stories out there, right? So hey,
I,
in the interest of time, like, I have another meeting to rush to, so
sure. So if anybody has any other questions, I just had one last question to ask you. Is that given the fact that all our data is getting exposed, when we go on social media, is there some way for people to protect themselves, so that their data is not being captured? Like that, does the incognito mode actually work?
so incognito works when you are wanting to stop your data being sent back through the browser to the browser company, right? So for that, the incognito mode works. But if you're posting in incognito mode on an Instagram or Facebook, that is not stopping the data from flowing back to these companies or to Moj or ShareChat, wherever, right? So it's more about there are ways of, like, one of the research areas that I worked on in Facebook was privacy preserving machine learning. It's like, how much data do we actually need to do this job, right? And how can we add some reasonable user guarantees in terms of, like, hey, your personal data is not going to be used uh, extensively. Like, it's like saying, for instance, if I want to figure out that 5% of the Indian public, right, is interested in football, let's say, right? So as an example, now I don't need to know that Supriya is interested in football. I just need to know that you contributed to this 5%. So I want to remove the fact that I want to know that you voted, but I don't want to know that Supriya voted. So how can you do that, and that is with guarantees, with privacy guarantees that this is how much. So there's a trade-off between privacy and utility, and how do you sort of set it up in such a way that you can get the maximum utility while losing less, very, very little privacy. So that trade-off is done by these algorithms which are more focused on privacy preserving machine learning.
I know that you have to go for another meeting. So thank you so much for being here with us today. I hope that the audience here has had most of the questions answered. And yeah, so thanks again. This has been very, very insightful.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me, and really nice seeing the energy in the room and the questions. These are really hard questions. Like, it quickly got to the hardest parts.
Yeah, thank you so much. So see you
Cool.
soon.
See you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.